Hello everyone, this is the Public Sociologist. Everything social explained. My name is Kemal Budak and I teach sociology at Georgia Tech. In our second episode, we'll be talking about March Madness, Cinderella stories, and the myth of fair competition. So let's get started. Every March, a strange thing happens in America. People who have ignored college basketball for 4 straight months suddenly become philosopher kings of the bracket. Your friend who hasn't watched a single possession since Thanksgiving is now explaining with complete confidence why a 12 seed is dangerous, because they are experienced and they can really shoot. A coworker who couldn't name 3 players in the Big Ten last week is suddenly talking about tempo, spacing, and guard play in March. Alumni who haven't worn university gear in 11 months are walking around in school colors like they are preparing for battle. Office pools appear, group chats become unbearable, and all of us, or at least many of us, participate in one of the great annual rituals of modern sports culture, convincing ourselves that this year, finally we understand the chaos. That ritual matters. March Madness isn't just a tournament. It's a social event, a cultural performance, a national mini holiday for people who enjoy watching probability, emotion, and delusion collide in public. It's one of the few moments when accountants, engineering students, bar regulars, sociologists, oh, that's me, and that one uncle who still thinks the full court press is about heart, all gather around the same spectacle and pretend to be experts. And what makes the whole thing so addictive is the story it seems to tell. And the story is simple, maybe too simple. Anybody can win. The little school can shock the giant. The underdog can take down the powerhouse. The team with fewer resources can outrun the team with the private jet, the giant budget, the celebrity alumni, and the coach who looks like he has a private tailor for quarter zips. March Madness gives us a concentrated dose of hope. It makes competition look clean, and it makes outcomes look deserved. It makes us think we are watching the fairest thing in American life. And if you listen to episode 1, you already know why that should make us nervous. Because in episode 1, we talked about meritocracy, the powerful belief that people rise mainly because of talent and effort. We talked about how that story survives not because it is fully true, but because it is emotionally satisfying and socially useful. Meritocracy tells winners they earned everything and tells everyone else the system is basically fine. It is one of those ideas that feels obvious right up until you start looking closely at structure, which is family background, education, networks, resources, and institutional advantage. And today, I want to take that same lens and aim it at sports, okay? Not because sports are fake, and not because effort doesn't matter, and not because talent is an illusion, but because March Madness is such a powerful stage for the myth of fair competition. And the more you look at it sociologically, the more interesting it becomes. Because the tournament really does have uncertainty. I know upsets are real, Cinderella stories are real, buzzer beaters are very real. But those moments of chaos happen inside a system that is anything but equal. The game may start at center court with 1 ball and 2 teams, but the inequality starts years earlier. So that is the question for this episode. What exactly are we watching when we watch March Madness? pure merit, pure chaos, democracy in sneakers? Or are we watching structured competition? Competition that feels fair because the rules are equal on paper, while the conditions underneath are profoundly unequal. That's what I want to unpack. And I want to start not with statistics, because before March Madness is an argument, it's a vibe, a ritual, a frenzy, a national fever dream with mascots, brackets, aluminum bleachers, and one underdog fan base acting like history itself has put on a jersey. March Madness works because it produces what Emil Durkheim, one of the founding fathers of sociology, would call collective effervescence. That's a fancy term for something simple, right? It means the shared emotional electricity people feel when they gather around a ritual or an event bigger than themselves. Religion can do this. Political rallies can do this. And concerts can do this. And yes, a tournament where a school you had never heard of until Tuesday suddenly beats a national powerhouse on Thursday can absolutely do this. Think about what happens during the tournament, right? Students paint their faces, campuses erupt, entire bars become temporary shrines to institutions most people ignored all semester, right? And group identity is hardened instantly. We say we won, even if our contribution to the program was buying a hoodie in 2011. In ordinary life, a lot of people feel fragmented and isolated. March Madness gives them a temporary, emotionally intense form of belonging. It turns strangers into a crowd and a crowd into a moral community. That matters because it tells us why Cinderella stories hit so hard. They are not just about basketball, they are little dramas of hope, mobility, and recognition. They are sports versions of the dream that the little guy can make it, that the overlooked can be seen, that the system isn't as closed as people fear. They are emotionally efficient. And in one upset, you get suspense, joy, moral satisfaction, and a symbolic lesson. David beats Goliath. Take some of the most famous examples. Villanova in 1985, an 8th seed beating Georgetown in the title game by shooting almost impossibly well. You want more recent examples? Of course, I have plenty for you. Think about George Mason in 2006, crashing the Final Four. Or VCU in 2011, coming from the first four all the way to the Final Four. Florida Gulf Coast in 2013, the Dunk City, turning a small program into a national event because they played like the laws of gravity were optional. Loyola Chicago in 2018, becoming America's adopted underdog, with Sister Jean turning into a national icon. Think about St. Peter's in 2022 or UMBC over Virginia in 2018, the first ever 16-over-1 upset in the men's tournament. These stories are real. They matter. They are part of what makes the tournament beautiful. But now comes the sociological move, guys. We have to ask what we do with these stories. Because we don't just enjoy them, we interpret them, we generalize from them. A Cinderella run happens and we say, see, anybody can do it. A 16 seed wins one game and we act like the whole system has been democratized. All right? And look, I love heart and hustle. Heart and hustle are wonderful. They're also the kind of vague sports words people use when they don't know what else to say. They just wanted it more. That is usually what people say when they want to sound profound, but are actually just narrating effort in a louder voice. What sociology asks is different. Not can underdogs win? Clearly they can. But what does the exception do for the way we think about the system? And the answer is, it makes the system feel fair. Cinderella stories do not prove the opportunity is broadly equal. They prove that outcomes aren't fully predetermined. They are not the same thing. One is about uncertainty, the other is about structure. And if you zoom out instead of zooming in, the pattern becomes clearer. The same types of programs dominate over time. Duke, maybe not this year, but Kansas, Kentucky, North Carolina, historically UCLA, more recently UConn. The names shift a little, the uniforms change, NIL changes some things, transfer rules change some things, but the broader pattern remains. Elite institutions keep appearing deep in the tournament because they are built to reproduce advantage. This is not cynicism, that is sociology. The point isn't that the tournament is rigged. It is not. The point is that the foundations of competition are unequal long before the game begins. Formal equality at tip-off isn't the same as equal preparation, equal resources, or equal opportunity. Same court, same ball, different words. And this is where some of you probably will push back and say, come on, sports are one of the fairest things we have. At least in sports, performance actually matters. And honestly, that's not a bad objection. Compared to many other social domains like elite hiring, legacy admissions, corporate promotions, sports are in some ways more visibly tied to performance. I know, a missed free throw is public, a bad defensive rotation is obvious, etc., etc. But sociology isn't denying performance. It is asking about the conditions under which performance gets produced. Which brings us to talent. Because one of the most powerful ideas in sports culture is that talent rises. The best players will find a way. The cream rises to the top. If you are good enough, you will be discovered. That sounds plausible until you start looking at how athletic development actually works. Talent isn't just found, it is cultivated, it is trained, financed, scouted, networked, and repeatedly confirmed by institutions. Maybe to put it bluntly, raw ability matters, but the social machinery around that ability matters too. Think about the typical path of an elite Division I basketball player. Long before college, many are already inside structured pipelines. Travel ball, AAU circuits, showcase camps, personal trainers, highlight reels, social media visibility. These pipelines aren't evenly available. They require money, they require time, transportation, information, social connections. Parents need to know where to go. Coaches need access to the right circuits. Kids need to be seen by the right people. Okay? Exposure is part of what turns potential into opportunity. And this is where Bourdieu helps. He talks about different forms of capital. Economic capital is the obvious one, money. But the cultural capital matters too. Knowing how systems work, how to navigate expectations, how to speak the language of opportunity. But he also says social capital matters. Who knows you? Who can recommend you? Who can get you into the right room? In sports, That might mean understanding recruiting culture, having a coach with connections, getting invited to the camps that matter. That is not fake talent. It is talent moving through unequal channels. And once players arrive at elite programs, the gap usually widens. Better facilities, better nutrition, more specialized coaching, more film work, better medical care, more internal competition, more television exposure. Yes, more pressure, but also more support. This is not just a difference in comfort, it's a difference in developmental environment. And Robert Merton, another sociologist, he called this the Matthew effect. Small early advantages snowball into larger later advantages. In simpler language, advantage compounds. The player who gets seen earlier gets better offers. The player with better offers gets better coaching. The player with better coaching performs in more visible settings, and the player in the more visible settings get further opportunities. Meanwhile, other talented players aren't necessarily less gifted. They are simply moving through thinner channels. So when people say the best players end up at the best schools, we as sociologists say or respond, yes, but ask how that sorting process works and how best gets recognized. Maybe an analogy helps here, guys. Imagine two musicians. One grows up with private lessons, quality instrument, parents who understand the application process for selective, conservatories. Another has extraordinary ear and instinct, but limited instruction, inconsistent access, and no pathway knowledge. Then, at age 18, both audition for the same room, and everyone says, great, now merit will decide. But merit did not begin in the room. Merit was being built, recognized, and rewarded for years beforehand. That's college basketball too. And once you see that, the mythology of pure sports merit starts to wobble a little. Okay? Then we can, move from players to programs, because institutions just as much matter. And college basketball isn't just a collection of athletes, it's an ecosystem of universities with wildly unequal budgets, histories, brands, booster networks, media relationships, facilities, expectations. The powerhouse programs aren't merely famous because they win. They usually win because they are powerful, and power reproduces itself. Okay? Take recruiting, for example. Why do top high school players cluster at certain programs? It is not only because those schools have won before, it is because they offer a package of benefits. Visibility, facilities, pro connections, stronger schedules, national broadcasts, the whole 9 yards. Okay? And that doesn't make athletes dupes. It makes them strategic. And the institution matters beyond players. Top programs have bigger staffs, bigger budgets, stronger alumni networks, more fan energy. They usually travel better. They attract media coverage. Okay? And their brands matter in how they are discussed, ranked, and remembered. Even seeding reflects structured advantage. I know it is not arbitrary, but teams that build strong resumes against top competition are rewarded. That sounds fair, and in one sense it is, but getting those opportunities often depends on conference strength, scheduling power, and institutional reputation. The tournament doesn't simply reveal hierarchy, it also reflects hierarchy that is built earlier in the season and frankly years earlier than that. Okay? Now, to be fair, not every strong program is a traditional blue blood. Gonzaga is a good example. For years, Gonzaga was treated as the plucky outsider who kept refusing to go away. But sociologically, Gonzaga is interesting precisely because it shows how sustained investment, good coaching, continuity, branding, repeated tournament visibility can build a new layer of institutional power over time. In other words, the story isn't small schools can always break through. The story is that institutions can, and under certain conditions, accumulate enough capital to change their place in the hierarchy. But that is still a structural story. Okay? So, no one game is not meaningless. One upset isn't fake. Underdogs can win, and when they do, it can be glorious. That doesn't erase the larger order, it just interrupts it. Okay? And this leads to the deeper question, why are we so eager to interpret those interruptions as proof that the whole system is fair? Because we want to believe in fair competition. Okay? That is not a throwaway line. It is one of the reasons sports are so emotionally powerful. Sports offer a visible moral drama. There's a scoreboard, there's a clock, there are rules, there's an ending. Okay? Someone wins, someone loses. The difference appears measurable. That's where sports become ideological. Not because the games are fake, because the stories we tell about them do cultural work. They train us to admire grind, resilience, performance under pressure. Those are not bad things to admire, but sports also tempt us to oversimplify. We start to confuse visible effort with equal opportunity. This is why March Madness is such a powerful symbolic machine. It gives us a compressed annual ritual in which inequality seems briefly conquerable. For a few days the underdog wins, the bracket breaks, and the country gets to rehearse a comforting fantasy. Maybe the world is more open than it looks. And again, sociology is the annoying discipline that says, slow down guys, yes the underdog won, celebrate it. But also ask why that victory feels so meaningful. Okay? Usually it feels meaningful because underdog victory is rare, and rare enough to be thrilling, rare enough to be mythic, rare enough to stand out against the background of patterned dominance. The exception is exciting because the pattern exists. That doesn't make the exception unimportant, it makes it interpretable. Okay? The deeper truth is not that March Madness is a lie. The deeper truth is that it is a ritual of structured uncertainty. Okay? The uncertainty is real, but structure is real too. So the next time you watch the tournament, enjoy the madness. Fill out the bracket. Make the responsible pick. Okay? That is part of the beauty of sports. You're allowed to have fun. Sociology isn't here to confiscate joy. But while you are having fun, notice a few things. Notice how often the same institutions remain near the top. Notice how quickly commentators they start praising underdogs for heart in ways they don't use for power horses, as if smaller schools run on sincerity and bigger schools run on payroll. Notice how talent has a biography. Notice how equal rules can coexist with unequal foundations. And notice how easy it is, how very easy it is to slide from they won tonight to therefore the system is fair. That is the move sociology asks us to resist. Okay? In episode 1, we said meritocracy survives because it takes structural inequality and translates it into moral language. It turns advantage into deservingness. And this episode adds a twist. Sports help make that translation feel natural. Sports aren't the only place where this happens, but they are one of the clearest. Okay, this is why this matters. This is not really just about basketball. It is about how people learn to read winners and losers. And that is where we will go next. Because in the next episode, we are going to leave the arena and open the app. We are going to talk about social media, being viral, having the influence. Why do some people blow up while others do not? Is it talent? Is it luck? Is it hard work? Or, once again, we are looking at structured visibility that gets narrated as pure individual success. That is next time. And until then, enjoy the bracket, respect the underdog, fear the office pool expert who says with entirely undeserved confidence, I just have a feeling about this 13 seed. And I know they are not going to say it until next year because only 4 teams left right now. Oh, wait a minute. One of them is number 1 seeded. The second one is also number 1 seeded. The third one is number 2 seeded. And the fourth one is number 3 seeded. Cinderellas, where are you guys? Remember, the madness is real. The structure is real too. See you in the next episode. Bye.